We are preparing for several rounds of severe weather starting on Wednesday that could lead to rainfall amounts we've not seen in over 15 years for parts of the Ohio Valley. We have all the details and more next at the Weather Farm. Welcome to the Weather Farm. We have the latest forecast for your Wednesday, and boy, are we talking about severe weather from the Ohio Valley through the Deep South, and we are talking about extraordinary amounts of rain. So let's dive right into this forecast. As we begin our Wednesday, we see an area of low pressure that's centered over southeastern Nebraska. It is bringing heavy rain across the Chicagoland, southern Wisconsin, and into northern Indiana areas. But behind it, we are getting those tight winds to wrap around, bringing that colder air into the system. And that is going to spread a lot of snow from Nebraska through the Dakotas up into northern Minnesota. They are going to be dealing with high winds and heavy amounts of snow, a definite late season blizzard, and another April Fool's joke from Mother Nature that says that winter is not over quite yet. Because as we begin our Wednesday, we are looking at a wide range of weather hazards across this country. Across the north, we have winter storm warnings and winter storm watches across the Dakotas into Minnesota. Through the Ohio Valley, we have flood watches, not necessarily for the amount of rain that we're going to get on our Wednesday into Thursday, but later in this week. Those flood watches extend all the way into Sunday for most of those places. And underneath those, what you don't see under that green is there's also a high wind advisory for places from Illinois all the way down to the Gulf Coast. And as we move back into Texas, we still are seeing those high red flag wind warnings for excessive winds, dry relative humidities, and the risk of fire. The Storm Prediction Center has gone ahead and upgraded part of the Ohio Valley into a moderate risk for our Wednesday, stretching from places like Evansville down through Paducah and Memphis into far eastern Arkansas. There's also a wide swath of an enhanced risk all the way from southern Michigan back towards central Texas, including the Dallas area. This storm system is wide-reaching in its impact. Primarily, we think it's going to start Wednesday afternoon and go overnight into Thursday morning. And we do see an area of tornado risk within this red oval area. Within 25 miles of a point, there's a 15% chance of a tornado occurring. And it's a hatched risk at that. And so that means that there's a significant likelihood that we are going to see tornadoes in this area. In that yellow area, that 10% area, it is also stretching from near Toledo, Ohio, all the way back down into far northwestern Louisiana. So friends, we're going to be talking about a long-lived and very dangerous situation for our Wednesday, and one that's going to have many components, tornadoes being one of those, but there's also a large hail component with this storm. That red area indicates 30% likelihood of large hail in excess of 2 inches, and it's hatched also, and that's pretty much from the Great Lakes, from the Chicagoland area, all the way back down into central Texas. And as I mentioned earlier, we're going to see that wind risk as well, where we're going to see a high likelihood of strong gusty winds that could exceed 60 to 70 miles per hour. Winds that we saw this past weekend on our Sunday as they raced through Illinois and Indiana and devastated many communities with winds that were topping 80 to 90 miles per hour across the Great Lakes and Ohio Valley. And the thing that's going to really help aid this storm is the high dew points. We see dew points surging into the mid 60s, and as we get towards Wednesday afternoon into evening, we could even see some dew points approaching the low 70s across northeastern Tennessee. So there's going to be a lot of moisture, a lot of as strong southwesterly winds are going to pump up those temperatures ahead of this system, and it's going to provide all the ingredients for a very potent and devastating severe weather outbreak for our Wednesday. In terms of our precipitation, by the time we get just to Thursday, now remember, this is for most areas in the Ohio and Tennessee valleys, this is a multi-day event. So just through Thursday, we could see at least up to 5 inches of rain across the land between the lakes area in southern Kentucky through northwestern Tennessee, a widespread area of 2 to 4 inches, and 1 to 3 inches all the way from Texas all the way up towards Cleveland, Ohio, into southwestern and southern Michigan. This is going to bring heavy amounts of rain in addition to the hail, the wind, and the tornado threat across this area. So let's take this map and let's analyze this storm hour by hour with the latest model run, looking at our HRRR model. And that HRRR model starts us off at 8 a.m. on our Wednesday. And so we see that heavy rain through the Chicagoland area into southern Michigan, but we start to see a line of storms that's weakening because it's losing that overnight nocturnal jet. But by the afternoon, with that dew points rising, those southwesterly winds, they're geostrophic to the lines of pressure, we start to see a line of storms. And we see a lot of discrete cells with this particular storm. And that's going to be key. If these cells stay discrete, that is going to allow quasi-linear convective system, and that's going to allow a deepening storm system, more severe storms, more potent threats of hail and tornadoes. If these lines were to congeal, and we talk about this a lot, then that's going to give the isolated tornado spin up as that line bulges out from the line of storms as it sweeps through. But right now, our thinking is we will have several discrete supercells forming from Indiana down through Illinois, Kentucky, Tennessee, all the way back down to Texas. And actually, as we get into some of these storms, we're going to take a look at some of the skew-T analysis to analyze these storms, and we'll get there in a minute. As I mentioned, the wind risk. Look, we're at 60, 70 miles per hour Wednesday afternoon. And as those winds move through Indiana and Illinois, we could see wind gusts again approaching 50 to 60 miles per hour. Especially with those thunderstorms, those discrete supercells, we're going to get wind gusts in excess of 70 to 80 miles per hour. And that wind threat will die down by the time we get to our Thursday morning. But here we have the photographs, and we have the Cape in the shaded color. And where we start to see those yellows, that's areas of Cape values in excess of 2,000 joules. And when we get to those levels, there's a high level of instability. And we start to see that forming across Indiana, Illinois, Kentucky, and Tennessee by the time we get to our Wednesday afternoon. But look at these individual photographs. Now, I want you to look at them and their direction. They should almost appear like a candy cane with a nice curve. We call that veering. But what you'll see is with these particular storms, I'm going to wait for this map to reset and cycle back to the front, because what we see, and it's one thing that could limit some of the convective capabilities. So look across Indiana here. Nice upside down U shape that we start to see. But as we get to that afternoon, we start to see a little bit of a cursive R. And so it's not that kind of curve, but it kind of curves back the other way. And we call that veering back veering. And when we see that happening, that can limit the thunderstorms from developing to their full potential. But the thing that's going to help them, even with the veering back veering that we're seeing from the photographs, is those high Cape values. And that's why I mentioned you can see that veering back veering in the photographs, but then when you look at that Cape values and you still see those up 1,500 towards 2,000 joules, that is an indication that whatever instability is there is going to be able to overcome any veering back veering. And the reason that's important is because, again, as we go up with height, to get that rotation, you want those to be moving in the same direction. But when you have that back veering at those higher altitudes, that kind of breaks down your rotation. But the Cape and the instability might be just enough to overcome that on our Wednesday. And that's something we're going to be watching overnight into the day on Wednesday. So let's take a look. We see that the LCL is about 1 kilometer above the ground. We'd like it to be a little bit lower, but still it's in a reasonable place. The capping layer does not happen to well high in the atmosphere. So once these storms get going, they're going to run free reign. We see these Cape values down around 2,000. We see storm relative helicities over 200, shear gates over 30 to 50. All the elements are there for tornadic thunderstorms to occur, and significant hail as we get those strong updrafts in the atmosphere. So those are some of the things that we are going to be watching over the next 48 hours to see how these storms develop. And here's another one from another location in the Ohio Valley. We start to see those same values, over 2,000 of CAPE, 200 to 300 storm relative helicity. The energy helicity index approaching 4. So when we see that value approaching 4, that indicates those strong, long-lived tornadoes are possible. We see up in the upper right that the hodograph does kind of have some rotation to it. It does have a little bit of back veering, so we will watch that. But again, the atmosphere is literally uncapped all the way up to well past 12 kilometers high. But by the time we get to our Thursday morning, we see those line of thunderstorms making their way through Ohio and Kentucky into Tennessee, making their way down toward the southeast. That snow has moved out of the northern plains, and we're going to talk about that. But a line of moisture has now moved back into the northeast with heavy rains across New York, spreading into Massachusetts, Vermont, and New Hampshire. And out west, it's relatively quiet. Our main focus is the Ohio Valley and the southeast with this round of storm. So let's take a look at that snowstorm on our Wednesday. We're going to see that low continue to deepen at about 984 millibar low on Wednesday. And it's going to spread snow constantly and heavy with strong winds across the Dakotas into Minnesota all day Wednesday into the overnight, and then end by the time we get to our Thursday morning. Locally, it's going to spread a swath of snow from central South Dakota just north of the Twin Cities through central Minnesota into Ontario of 8 to 12 inches of snow. And then it's going to be a sharp cutoff to the south where we're going to see that warmer air being pumped up into the system as it gets wrapped into that area of low pressure. So where that low tracks and just to the north of it by about 150 miles, that's where we're going to see that heaviest band of snow of 8 to 12 inches for our Wednesday. And by the time we get to our Friday, we see that front system has sagged a little bit further south, still bringing heavy rain from Texas through Arkansas to Tennessee to Kentucky. So by the time we get to our Saturday, we're going to see that warm front beginning to lift back to the north, and it's going to bring that plume of moisture and that steady train of rain from Texas through Missouri, Illinois, and Indiana into Ohio on our Saturday. And this is what's really going to be the main event as far as the heavy rainfall. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, we are going to see several rounds of heavy rain across the Ohio Valley. And as we make our way to our Sunday morning, that rain is going to move into Pennsylvania, Ohio, stretching back down through Louisiana as it continues to move to the east. As we see a trough digging in across the Central Plains, that's going to bring cooler weather to begin our next week, but it's going to dig and it's going to nudge that system out of the way by the time we end our upcoming weekend. And so we're going to watch for severe weather Friday, Saturday, and Sunday as we make our way through the upcoming weekend. And by the time we are done, by the time we get to Monday morning, we could see widespread areas, 7 to 15 inches of rain from central Ohio all the way back down to Oklahoma and far northeastern Texas. And as that system continues to make its way through the southeast and move east, as that trough digs in behind it, we're going to see heavy rains making their way towards the Carolinas, into Georgia, and to Virginia to begin our next week. So definitely some of these amounts that are being forecasted are going to rival the heavy flooding rains that we saw back in April of 2011, almost 15 years ago. So we will expect extensive flooding as we begin our next week. And so we will bring you the latest information as we have it here at the Weather Farm. Well, we hope you've enjoyed this forecast here at the Weather Farm. Stay tuned with us. We will have several updates on the storms on our Facebook page, and we'll try to do as many videos as we can to bring you the latest information, especially in terms of severe weather this upcoming week. Have a great Wednesday, and we will see you soon.